HMP Frankland is not a prison designed for rehabilitation. It is a prison designed for separation, for containment, for silence. Built in the late 1980s in the northeast of England, Frankland was created for one specific purpose: to hold the most dangerous prisoners in the United Kingdom, people considered too violent, too influential, or too unpredictable to be managed anywhere else. This is where the UK sends inmates when control becomes the priority and risk outweighs every other consideration. Unlike many British prisons that evolved over centuries, Frankland was designed with modern security philosophy in mind. Its layout reflects a system that assumes threat at all times. Wide perimeters, reinforced barriers, controlled movement, minimal interaction. Every part of the prison is built around one idea: isolation prevents influence. Frankland primarily houses Category A prisoners, inmates considered a serious threat to the public, the prison system, or national security. Many are serving life sentences. Some are held under extreme restrictions due to past violence against staff or other prisoners. This is not a place of short stays. For many inside, Frankland becomes permanent. The moment an inmate arrives, life changes immediately. Movement is restricted from the start. Interaction is limited. Privileges are minimal. Every decision is filtered through security assessment. Frankland does not ease inmates in. It establishes control immediately. Cells are functional and sparse. Comfort is not a design consideration. Furniture is fixed. Personal property is limited. Surveillance is constant. The environment communicates one message clearly: this is not a place for negotiation. Daily routines follow strict schedules. Doors open and close at set times. Movements are escorted. Association periods are short and heavily monitored. In some cases, inmates may go days with minimal contact. This structure is intentional. Frankland is designed to prevent communication between high-risk prisoners. Influence is seen as dangerous. Relationships are treated as potential threats. Isolation is not a punishment here. It is a management strategy. Many inmates housed at Frankland have histories of organizing violence, exerting control over others, or attacking staff. The prison exists to break those patterns by removing opportunity. But isolation comes at a cost. The psychological impact of long-term separation is profound. Humans are not built for sustained isolation, yet Frankland relies on it to function. Inmates adapt by withdrawing inward, limiting emotional expression, and controlling reactions. Survival depends on restraint. The prison operates under some of the strictest regimes in the UK. Enhanced supervision units and separation units are used frequently. Inmates who pose ongoing risks may spend extended periods alone, with movement limited to exercise and essential activities. Even those not in full isolation experience restricted association. Group activities are rare. Trust is limited. Silence becomes normal. For officers, working at Frankland requires a different mindset. Authority must be absolute but controlled. Familiarity is discouraged. Emotional distance is necessary. Every interaction is governed by procedure. Officers are trained to anticipate violence rather than respond to it. The goal is prevention, not reaction. This means reading subtle cues, monitoring changes in behavior, and acting early. Mistakes at Frankland can be serious. The prison's population includes individuals with extensive histories of extreme violence. Assaults on staff are not theoretical risks, they are known possibilities. Every movement is treated accordingly. This creates an environment of constant vigilance. Over time, vigilance becomes instinctive. Officers learn to measure every action. Conversations are brief. Commands are clear. Authority is asserted through consistency rather than force. Frankland does not rely on intimidation. It relies on certainty. The prison's reputation extends beyond its walls. Within the UK prison system, transfer to Frankland is significant. It signals escalation. It marks an inmate as exceptionally high risk. Once transferred, leaving is difficult. Classification changes are rare. Behavior improvements are scrutinized heavily. History carries more weight than present conduct. This permanence shapes how inmates behave. Many realize early that progress does not lead to meaningful change in conditions. Compliance avoids punishment but does not guarantee reward. Rehabilitation exists in theory, but security dominates in practice. This creates a quiet resignation. Inmates adapt by minimizing themselves, speaking less, moving carefully, avoiding attention. In a place where every action is monitored, Invisibility becomes safety. The architecture reinforces this mindset. Long corridors, controlled sight lines, reinforced doors. Everything is built to reduce unpredictability. Even exercise is structured. Outdoor areas are enclosed and monitored. Movement is limited. Time outside cells is measured. The outside world feels distant. For inmates serving long sentences, time inside Frankland reshapes identity. Days blur together. Weeks lose distinction. The future becomes abstract. Hope, when it exists, is managed carefully. Officers witness this transformation over years. They see inmates arrive defiant and leave subdued. Not necessarily reformed, contained. This containment is the prison's success metric. Frankland does not measure success by rehabilitation outcomes or reduced recidivism. It measures success by absence of catastrophe. A quiet wing is a good wing. A week without incident is success. But this stability is fragile. The prison exists under constant pressure. Overcrowding across the UK system increases transfers. Staffing shortages add strain. External events ripple inward. Frankland absorbs these pressures silently. Incidents do occur. Assaults happen. Lockdowns follow. Procedures tighten. The system resets and continues. The public rarely sees this side of the prison system. Frankland operates largely out of view. Media attention surfaces briefly after major incidents, then fades. Inside, routines remain unchanged. This invisibility allows the prison to function without constant scrutiny, but it also means the long-term effects of extreme isolation are rarely examined. Frankland raises difficult questions. What happens when containment becomes permanent? What is lost when security overrides all other goals? And how does a system balance protection with humanity? The prison does not answer these questions. It operates within them. HMP Frankland exists because the UK prison system needs somewhere to place individuals it considers unmanageable elsewhere. It is a response to risk, not a solution to violence. And to understand what that response truly costs, you have to look beyond the walls, into the daily reality of isolation, control, and silence that defines life inside. This is only the beginning of that story. Inside Frankland, isolation is not an exception, it is the foundation. While many prisons use separation sparingly, Frankland integrates it into daily management. Enhanced supervision units and separation wings exist not as temporary measures, but as long-term solutions for inmates deemed persistently dangerous. For some prisoners, time alone stretches into months. For others, it becomes years. Cells in these units are stripped back to essentials. Fixed furniture, limited personal items, observation points positioned to monitor behavior constantly. Interaction is reduced to the minimum required to function. Conversations are brief. Eye contact is limited. Every detail is recorded. This environment is designed to remove opportunity. Without access to others, inmates cannot exert influence. Without privacy, they cannot organize. Without movement, they cannot escalate. Control is achieved by reducing choice. But reducing choice has consequences. Extended isolation reshapes perception. Time slows. Sound becomes sharper. Silence grows heavier. Without normal social feedback, thoughts loop inward. Minor frustrations magnify. Memory blurs. Inmates adapt by suppressing reaction. Emotional flattening becomes a defense. Anger is dangerous. Despair is dangerous. Even curiosity can feel risky. Frankland teaches restraint by necessity. For officers assigned to these units, the work is intense and exacting. Every interaction must follow protocol precisely. Doors are opened in sequence. Movements are timed. Backup is always present. Officers are trained never to underestimate risk, regardless of how quiet an inmate appears. Calm does not mean safe. Silence does not mean compliance. This mindset governs daily operations. Staff rotations are carefully managed to prevent fatigue, but burnout remains common. Working in an environment where threat is constant demands emotional control that cannot be switched off easily. Over time, many officers report a narrowing of emotional range. Detachment becomes habit. Outside the prison, ordinary situations can feel overstimulating or unpredictable. The prison follows them home. Frankland's internal culture reinforces this detachment. Professional distance is not only encouraged, it is required. Familiarity creates vulnerability. Personal connection invites manipulation. Authority is maintained through consistency. Officers speak calmly. Commands are clear. Deviations are corrected immediately. This precision keeps order, but it also removes flexibility. When systems prioritize control above all else, adaptability suffers. New approaches are viewed cautiously. Innovation is slow. Tradition dominates. Frankland reflects this rigidity. Policies evolve after incidents, but the core philosophy remains unchanged. Containment first, everything else second. This philosophy shapes how inmates are classified and managed. Risk assessments determine housing, movement, and access to activities. Once labeled high risk, inmates rarely shed that designation. Behavioral improvement is acknowledged, but history weighs heavily. Past violence carries permanent consequences. This permanence affects motivation. Many inmates understand early that compliance does not lead to meaningful improvement. It prevents punishment, but it rarely opens doors. As a result, behavior becomes strategic. Inmates follow rules to survive, not to progress. Rehabilitation programs exist, but participation is limited by security concerns. Group activities are rare. Individual interventions are constrained. Risk management dominates planning. This creates a paradox. The prison exists to manage dangerous individuals, but by isolating them so completely, it limits opportunities for change. Improvement becomes difficult to demonstrate. Growth becomes abstract. Frankland accepts this trade-off. The priority is not transformation. It is prevention. The prison's location reinforces its isolation. Situated far from major urban centers, it remains physically distant from public scrutiny. Media coverage appears briefly after major incidents, then fades. Inside, routines continue unchanged. Lockdowns occur when necessary. Entire wings can be sealed after incidents. Movement stops. Association ends. Tension rises. For inmates, lockdowns intensify isolation. For staff, they restore control but demand heightened vigilance. These periods leave lasting effects. Even after lockdowns end, caution persists. Trust is slow to return. Restrictions often remain. This cycle reinforces the prison's atmosphere. Frankland operates under continuous pressure, from overcrowding elsewhere in the system, from staffing shortages, from the sheer difficulty of managing high-risk populations. Every transfer into Frankland brings new challenges, new histories, new tensions, new risks. The prison absorbs them quietly. Unlike prisons defined by riots or spectacle, Frankland's danger is subtle. It exists in the constant readiness, the careful choreography of movement, the understanding that stability is never guaranteed. Violence is rare, but when it occurs, it is serious. Assaults on staff, coordinated disruptions, and self-harm incidents all shape operational decisions. Each event tightens procedures further. The system learns through restriction. Over time, this learning produces an environment where silence becomes normal. Wings remain quiet. Interactions are brief. Days pass without incident. From the outside, this looks like success. Inside, it feels like suspension. Time does not move forward here. It settles. For inmates serving life sentences, Frankland becomes a permanent condition rather than a place. Identity narrows. Expectations fade. The outside world becomes distant, then abstract. Release, if possible at all, feels unimaginable. For staff, years inside Frankland reshape perspective. Danger becomes normalized. Control becomes instinctive. The outside world feels louder, less predictable. The prison leaves marks on everyone. Frankland's role within the UK prison system is clear. It is where risk is contained when other institutions cannot manage it. It exists because society demands protection. But protection comes with cost. That cost is paid quietly, over years, through isolation, restraint, and emotional distance. It is not dramatic. It does not make headlines daily. It accumulates. To understand Frankland fully, one must look beyond its security measures and into the human consequences of permanent containment. Because when isolation becomes routine and control becomes absolute, the effects do not stay confined within prison walls. They follow people long after the doors close. As years accumulate inside Frankland, the prison's most defining feature becomes clear. Nothing here is temporary. Restrictions do not ease with time. Silence does not soften. The system is designed to endure, and to make those inside endure with it. For inmates, this permanence reshapes how they understand consequence. In most prisons, good behavior holds the promise of progress, movement to lower security, increased association, or access to programs. At Frankland, those incentives are limited. History outweighs improvement. An inmate's past actions follow them indefinitely. Violent incidents, attempts to influence others, or threats to staff remain central to risk assessments long after they occur. Progress is acknowledged cautiously, often without tangible reward. This creates a psychological stasis. Inmates learn that effort does not necessarily change outcome. Compliance becomes maintenance rather than advancement. Survival depends on avoiding attention, not on standing out. The prison rewards predictability. Routine becomes a shield. Days follow identical patterns. Wake, wait, move when permitted, return to cell. Time outside the cell is brief, structured, and monitored. For some inmates, this predictability offers stability. For others, it becomes suffocating. The lack of variation compresses experience. Weeks blur together. Months lose distinction. Memory becomes anchored not to events, but to restrictions. In this environment, identity narrows. Inmates stop defining themselves by who they are or who they were. They define themselves by what they must avoid. Conflict, visibility, reaction. This inward focus reshapes behavior profoundly. Many inmates develop an intense awareness of their own impulses. They learn to intercept anger before it surfaces, to suppress curiosity, to manage frustration silently. This is not growth, it is adaptation. Frankland does not cultivate change. It enforces restraint. The prison's architecture reinforces this psychological narrowing. Long corridors limit sightlines. Reinforced doors create distance. Observation points remind inmates they are always seen. Privacy is minimal. Autonomy is scarce. Even simple choices, when to move, when to speak, when to rest, are regulated. Over time, decision-making muscles weaken. Initiative fades. The system does not punish initiative. It simply does not reward it. For staff, this environment demands constant discipline. Officers must remain consistent regardless of circumstance. Familiarity is avoided. Emotional responses are controlled. This consistency creates stability, but it also creates emotional distance. Officers often describe a sense of operating on autopilot. Procedures become second nature. Commands are delivered calmly, without inflection. Authority is exercised quietly. This calm is essential. Escalation invites risk, but maintaining this composure over years carries its own cost. Many officers report emotional blunting. Reactions soften. Empathy becomes measured. Outside the prison, this can manifest as detachment or fatigue. The prison's demands do not remain at work. Frankland shapes professional identity deeply. Officers are not merely employees. They become guardians of a system that depends on their vigilance. Their role is defined by prevention. A day without incident is success. This metric shapes priorities. Rehabilitation outcomes are distant. Human connection is secondary. Control is immediate. The prison does not hide this reality. Frankland is explicit in its purpose. It exists to contain individuals deemed too dangerous to be managed elsewhere. It does not promise change. It promises separation. This clarity allows it to function, but it also hardens it. Critics argue that such environments risk perpetuating the very behaviors they seek to control. Isolation can intensify mental health issues. Lack of social interaction can erode coping skills. Supporters argue that the alternative, allowing influence, organization, or violence, is unacceptable. Frankland sits at the center of this debate. The prison's isolation units are often cited as evidence of this tension. Designed to manage extreme risk, they place inmates in conditions that test psychological endurance. Extended time alone reshapes cognition. Without normal social cues, perception shifts. Thoughts echo. Minor irritations grow larger. Mental health services exist, but access is constrained by security concerns. Treatment focuses on stability, not exploration. The goal is to prevent deterioration, not to encourage growth. This reflects the prison's broader mission. Frankland does not aim to heal. It aims to hold. For inmates serving life sentences, this reality settles slowly. Early defiance gives way to resignation. Resistance fades. Compliance becomes routine. Hope, when it exists, is abstract. It attaches not to change within the system, but to endurance within it. The outside world becomes increasingly distant. News arrives filtered and delayed. Cultural shifts pass unnoticed. Technology evolves without them. Over time, this detachment deepens. Inmates may know the outside world exists, but it no longer feels accessible. Life beyond the walls becomes theoretical rather than imaginable. This disconnection reinforces the prison's internal focus. Survival depends on managing the immediate environment, not on planning for the future. Frankland does not encourage forward thinking. It encourages stability. This stability is maintained through layers of procedure. Searches are frequent. Movements are controlled. Communication is monitored. Every aspect of daily life reinforces the same message. Control is constant. The prison's success lies in its ability to maintain this control without spectacle. There are no daily riots. No constant noise. Instead, there is quiet. That quiet is intentional. Silence reduces friction. Reduced friction lowers risk. Risk management drives policy. But silence also hides strain. Beneath the surface, pressure accumulates. Inmates manage frustration internally. Officers carry stress quietly. The system absorbs tension continuously. Frankland functions because it is designed to absorb that pressure, but absorption is not resolution. The longer pressure remains, the more effort it takes to contain it. This is why Frankland requires constant vigilance. A single miscalculation can disrupt stability. A moment of complacency can create opportunity. The prison operates under the assumption that failure is always possible. This assumption shapes everything. Frankland is not a place of dramatic collapse. It is a place of sustained restraint. Its danger lies not in chaos, but in the effort required to prevent it. And that effort never ends. As the years pass inside Frankland, a quiet truth becomes impossible to ignore. The prison does not evolve with the people inside it. The system remains fixed, while those living and working within it are forced to adapt continuously. This imbalance defines daily life. For inmates, adaptation becomes an act of preservation. Emotional responses are moderated. Curiosity is limited. Even boredom is managed carefully, because boredom can lead to frustration, and frustration can lead to attention. Attention is dangerous. In a place where history never fades, visibility carries risk. Being noticed, by staff or by other inmates, can change conditions instantly. A single incident, even a minor one, can result in tighter restrictions that last months or longer. As a result, many inmates choose predictability over expression. They follow routines exactly. They speak only when required. They reduce their presence. This behavior is often mistaken for compliance. In reality, it is calculation. Frankland rewards those who create the fewest complications. Stability is prized above all else. Change, even positive change, is treated cautiously. This caution extends to every layer of the institution. Programs designed to encourage engagement are limited by security concerns. Group activities are rare. Education exists, but access is tightly controlled. Any initiative that introduces unpredictability is scrutinized. The result is an environment where improvement is difficult to demonstrate, even when it exists. Inmates may mature, reflect, and self-regulate, but the system has little room to acknowledge those changes. Risk classifications are slow to adjust. Past behavior carries permanent weight. This permanence shapes expectations. Many inmates stop believing that effort will lead to progress. They comply because non-compliance brings consequences, not because compliance offers opportunity. Hope, under these conditions, becomes fragile. For staff, this environment demands constant balance. Officers must enforce rules without provoking reaction. They must maintain authority without escalation. Every interaction is purposeful. This precision reduces incidents, but it also narrows the emotional range of the job. Officers learn to detach. Empathy is controlled. Personal engagement is avoided. These boundaries protect staff, but they also isolate them. Over time, the prison's emotional distance extends beyond its walls. Many officers report difficulty reconnecting with normal social environments. Conversations feel louder. Conflicts feel sharper. The discipline required inside does not translate easily outside. The prison becomes a lens through which everything is viewed. Frankland's internal culture reinforces this separation. The work is respected, but it is not romanticized. There is no illusion of transformation. The goal is containment, and everyone understands it. This clarity prevents confusion, but it also prevents ambition. The system does not ask what inmates could become. It asks only how to prevent harm today. This short-term focus is effective operationally. Frankland rarely experiences large-scale disorder. Its control mechanisms work, but the absence of chaos does not equal well-being. The psychological weight of long-term isolation accumulates quietly. Inmates experience changes in sleep, concentration, and emotional regulation. Minor stresses feel amplified. Time distorts. Without meaningful variation, the mind turns inward. Thoughts repeat. Memories resurface. The past becomes more vivid than the present. For some, this leads to reflection. For others, it leads to rumination. Mental health services attempt to stabilize these effects, but treatment is constrained by security. Sessions are brief. Privacy is limited. Continuity is difficult. The focus remains on managing risk, not exploring trauma. Frankland accepts this limitation. The prison is built to contain, not to heal. This distinction matters. Inmates serving life sentences often reach a point of psychological equilibrium, not peace, but acceptance. The environment becomes predictable. Expectations narrow. Resistance fades. This acceptance is not resignation. It is survival. The prison does not break people loudly. It reshapes them slowly. For some, this reshaping reduces volatility. Anger subsides. Impulses are controlled. For others, it creates emotional numbness. Neither outcome is celebrated. Both are tolerated. The institution measures success by continuity. As long as the system functions, its internal effects remain secondary. Frankland's isolation from public view reinforces this approach. Without sustained scrutiny, practices persist unchanged. Reviews occur after incidents, not proactively. The prison's very effectiveness shields it from attention. This creates a paradox. The more stable Frankland becomes, the less its internal cost is examined. Yet that cost is real. It appears in staff turnover, in early retirements, in long-term inmates who struggle to adapt to any environment beyond rigid control. It appears in the difficulty of reintegration for those who eventually leave. Years spent in extreme containment do not prepare people for autonomy. Decision-making becomes overwhelming. Freedom feels chaotic. The instincts built for survival inside Frankland do not dissolve at the gate. This reality complicates the prison's role within the justice system. Containment may protect society in the short term, but its long-term effects ripple outward. Frankland exists because risk exists. But risk is not static. It changes with time, context, and experience. A system built solely to contain risk struggles to adapt when risk evolves. This rigidity keeps Frankland effective and trapped. The prison stands as a symbol of certainty in an uncertain system. When other institutions fail, Frankland absorbs the pressure. It does so without complaint, without spectacle, and without promise of change. This is its strength, and also its limitation. Frankland does not pretend to offer resolution. It offers control. The question is whether control alone is enough. As long as the answer remains yes, prisons like Frankland will continue to exist, quiet, controlled, and heavy with consequence. And the people inside will continue to adapt, endure, and carry the weight of that system long after the doors close behind them.